and welcome to the Second Tier Podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks, and I'm joined by the Steve Cooper to my Alice Cooper. Here's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
Justin, how the hell are you?
I'm good, all things considering. Yeah, I think the Alice Cooper reference is a bit harsh. Alice Cooper's a legend.
Yeah, I'm Alice Cooper. You're Steve Cooper.
Steve Cooper's a legend as well.
Yeah, hey, you're the slightly overachieving championship manager who may not be as looked in as good light when he inevitably gets sacked by Forest in a year's time.
We'll take it.
I am the Rock legend.
Grasping at straws, but yeah, let's go.
Yeah, this is the number one championship specific podcast, the Second Tier. Thank you for joining us wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it's another preview show. We're going to look ahead to all the games. Well, I say all the games, some of the big games coming up in the championship this weekend. Talk about some of the big news from the past few days. And boy, oh boy, the championship never fails to disappoint in that category. And finally, we'll finish off with a Craig Bryson pub quiz right at the end. It's my turn to answer the questions this week. I'm trusting Justin has picked a good player for once, but we'll wait and see on that one. Before we get things underway, may I point you in the direction of FansBet, the fan-led sports betting company committed to supporting charities and causes which are important to fans. Make sure you check them out at fansbet.com and claim your bet 10 get 10 plus 50 free spins welcome offer. Terms and restrictions apply. Full details on site. 18 plus. Please do gamble responsibly. Visit begambleaware.org for more info, and do also check out FansBet responsible gambling tools. You will see us contributing to their social content, talking all things championship. So do give them a follow. And we have very much enjoyed that over the past week, haven't we, Justin? Giving our thoughts in very quick fashion. So yeah, keep an eye out for that on Twitter. It's good fun, isn't it? Right, Justin, let's talk about some of the big games in the championship this weekend. We'll start off with Stevie Coop's first game in charge of the Tricky Trees. It's Forest v Millwall, Justin. If you're Steve Cooper, would you be looking at this game and thinking this is a good chance to get 3 points on the board in your first game?
Millwall, I don't think so. I think you're looking to just get off to a steady start, a more positive start than perhaps Chris Hughton has got Forest fans used to, essentially. Forest haven't won at home in 5, and they've conceded at least 2 goals in each of those games. I think Forest fans will just be looking for a performance that they see a light at the end of the tunnel, because it's been a rough ride for them in terms of style of play, performances. And in terms of Steve Cooper, it's a very difficult game as your first game. We know what Gary Rowett's like, Garrett Drawett, shall we say. So it's going to be a difficult game for I didn't write that down, by the way. I had to lay it in. It's going to be a difficult game for Forest.
I think, I'd agree with you. Forest fans will probably be hoping for an instant sign that Steve Cooper is going to be the man to finally make this club progress. But considering how crap they've been so far this season, then I think just small signs of progression will be good enough for me anyway. Tightening up that defence will be the first thing, and Steve Cooper, as we saw with Swansea last season, one of the best defences in the division. That'll be his first task, I'm sure. And then it's building up towards the other end of the pitch, where Forest have equally been not very good so far this season. But if they show signs that they are willing to play a more expansive style of football, then I think that will please Forest fans, because under Chris Hughton, they've been, subject to some turgid performances recently, and that's not been helped by the tactics that Chris Hughton likes to employ. Having said that, Steve Cooper isn't necessarily the most adventurous in his tactics either, but I wonder if he will look at what Forest fans have been saying about Chris Hughton's style of play and be thinking to himself, maybe we have license to be a bit more adventurous.
It's a good theory, I guess. I think being more expansive isn't necessarily where Forest need to go. They just need to be a results-orientated side, especially in the interim while Steve Cooper finds his feet. And if we look at Sabri Lamouchi, that was winning football. It wasn't attractive attacking football. There were sparks at times. You're looking at that Fulham goal at Craven Cottage where there was numerous passes, and there were goals like that throughout the season, but they were probably more of a defensive side than they were attacking. And obviously with Chris Hughton built on very solid foundations last season, we thought it was a platform to build on this season. It hasn't happened. Steve Cooper, I think, is a blend of good attacking play and good defensive play. But as we saw with his Swansea side, when they go 1 or 2-0 up, that's when they start to be a bit more defensive. So I think that was a learning curve for Steve Cooper, and as well for Forest fans. It's just something that they might have to get used to, rather than it being an attacking, expansive style of play that they crave.
But they've got the players to play that, haven't they? So I do wonder if because one of the things that Swansea were held back with last year was they were very over reliant on Andre Ayew, weren't they?
Yeah.
And now Steve Cooper obviously doesn't have Andre Ayew to help them out when they're really, really struggling. So I'd probably also make the point that Steve Cooper, did wonderful things with a Swansea side that didn't necessarily have, talent coming out of its ears. Whereas Forest, I'd say player for player, probably have a better squad than the Swansea one from last season. I think there's at least an argument to be made with it. So once you have, a good tactical head like Steve Cooper in charge with a decent side, then you look at it and think maybe this is a chance for him to, be a bit more adventurous. We'll wait and see. Only time will tell, and we'll find out, hopefully, given some sort of idea against Millwall this weekend. I do think a draw is on the cards, considering Millwall are more than happy to, battle it out for a draw. And I think Steve Cooper would probably take a draw as well.
Yeah.
But we shall wait and see on that point. Let's go to West Brom v QPR, Justin, which at the start of the season you'd have said would be a cracker. And I think it still is a cracker because both teams started well, but now both are without a win in their last 3. What would you say has gone wrong for these two recently?
Well, I'll start with QPR. They're still creating chances. They're not putting them away as often or as efficiently as they were earlier on in the season. I think they were outperforming their XG at one point, which is not a good place to be, but they started to pick up in terms of chance creation, which is always good. So yeah, it's creating more chances, but also not giving teams too many chances. They've given teams too many head starts, and they've looked a bit soft defensively. I think would be the technical way of saying it. So it's being a little bit more resolute defensively, as well as a bit more ruthless in front of goal. I think Charlie Austin's going to be back, and he obviously scored twice in midweek against Everton in the Cup, which you always want your strikers to be in form. And he's coming up against West Brom, his former club. As for West Brom, they've looked absolutely fine. Just fine though, because they just haven't been putting the ball in the back of the net. It's down to that. They've been misfiring, haven't they? So if they start to put chances away, if they get one chance and put it away, I think that'll be 2 or 3 for West Brom. It'll be one of those games.
Yeah, it's interesting for West Brom because they scored 12 in their first 5 games and have only managed 2 in their last 3. But I don't think in terms of, creating chances, they're necessarily too different. I wonder if it may be a case of teams potentially not figuring them out, but going some sort of way towards that. And then that takes you back to the argument about, a lack of a plan B, where we've seen, Derby were a very good example about that just over a week ago, where they parked the bus. And from that point on, it was West Brom just trying to get the ball into the box and Derby dealing with it. With QPR, they're a side who have been a bit faulty at the back recently. And you'd think, well, if that is the case and they continue to be faulty at the back, then West Brom may be able to take advantage of that. But QPR is still a very good side defensively. Your device has been fantastic so far this season. And Rob Dickey is just a class act, isn't he? And Johan Barbe, again, just consistently brilliant as well. So the QPR, it'll be interesting to see again what kind of tactic Mark Warburton goes for here. I think for them, you're absolutely right. Putting away chances has just been an absolute nightmare for them recently. They've consistently, apart from the Bournemouth game last weekend or in midweek, whenever it was, they've consistently been creating chances, just not being able to find the back of the net. And that's something that has got to be addressed here. I mean, that goes without saying, doesn't it? And they're not going to get as many chances you'd expect against this West Brom side. Excuse me. I'm just so, perplexed about QPR missing their chances. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be an interesting game. And I think it's a must win, really, for both teams to get their things back on track, really,
Definitely.
because the last 3 games have really been frustrating for both, haven't they? Justin, let's move on to Sheffield United versus Derby, which I don't really know how to feel about this game if you're in the shoes of a Derby fan, because having pulled off a miraculous result against Stoke last weekend, despite everything that's going on off the pitch, you're coming up against a Sheffield United side who are improving now, aren't you? And I don't really know what the expectations are in this game.
I think it's just get a performance and leave it all out on the pitch, because I do think Derby have got the quality to stem Sheffield United. I don't think Sheffield United are that much of a scary side. West Brom, I honestly thought West Brom would do Derby about 3 or 4-0, and if it wasn't for Kel Roos, that could have been the case. Now going into this game, I think they're 2 possession-based teams who, with Derby, they've got this resurgence that they want to put out because of everything that's going on. They're backed by a sold-out away end. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a result here from Derby's perspective, but obviously with the quality that Sheffield United have, and the good form of key players like Billy Sharp, for example, and Morgan Gibbs-White, obviously, it's an interesting game from that perspective as well. I do fancy a score draw, and I think the key to this game is Morgan Gibbs-White and Ravel Morrison, because they both have a similar profile where they like to find space, they like to impact the final third, and it's going to be those two who are going to have an impact. Whoever's kept the quietest, I think the result will swing their way. Well, the opposite way.
I mean, fair play to Derby fans for selling out the away end, considering tickets are £37, and with everything that's going on off the pitch, then I don't think many people would have blamed them, but nonetheless, fair play to that. But from a Derby perspective, this is a bad time to come up against Sheffield United, isn't it? Who are looking like a rising phoenix at the moment and are looking very dangerous, especially Morgan Gibbs-White, who is just such a talented player. I can't get enough of him at the moment. He's such a joy to watch. And in that whole game at the weekend, everything just seemed to go through him. So Derby will be fully aware that if they are going to stop Sheffield United, they need to keep a tight leash on him. That's not to say they haven't got other players who will hurt you, like Ilman Ndiaye, who was fantastic just over a week ago. They've got plenty of players who can hurt you, but Morgan Gibbs-White is looking like the real danger man for Sheffield United at the moment. But considering Derby really solid defensively, they'll be fancying their chances here. Having said that, Sheffield United will also be fancying their chances of getting 3 points here against a Derby side who have more than just problems on the pitch. Let's go to our final game that we're previewing in the midweek, Justin. That is Bristol City versus Fulham. Bristol City, who can't win at home, haven't won at home since January, coming up against probably the best side in the division.
1-0 Bristol City. Done.
You're calling it now.
The
thing is with Fulham, they are struggling a bit at the moment, aren't they? We're seeing 2 sides of Fulham. We saw, the one that lost to Blackpool at the weekend, and then, the weekend before, I should say, and then they also lost to Reading this weekend, just gone, but then they absolutely smashed Fulham in midweek as well. So I'm not really sure what to expect from this Fulham side at the moment, who are showing signs of weakness.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because obviously coming out of a 3-game week, both West Brom and Fulham have picked up 3 points each. Fulham have just won 1 game out of the 3, and West Brom have drawn all 3. So yeah, it's been a bit of a strange one for both of those sides. And obviously for Fulham, they went away to Blackpool. You expect an onslaught there, but Blackpool nicked the 1-0 win. And then there's the Birmingham City game, and then there's the game of the weekend against Reading, where they created so many chances, and again just didn't put them away, and it just sounded like a broken record on this episode, but it is literally that simple. If you put chances away, you will put teams to bed, because the teams that we mentioned so far, QPR, West Brom, and Fulham, they've got the quality to do it. They're just not doing it. And as for Bristol City, not won at home since January. I think 14 games have passed since then, and they've got players to hurt Fulham as well. So I'd be very nervous as a Fulham fan heading into this game, because it could be another defeat. And if it looks on Bristol City side like it was last week against QPR, well, you never know.
You never know. With Fulham, it is incredibly frustrating how many chances they create, but just don't put them away. And if it is another game where that does happen, then I think it'll be fair to raise plenty of question marks about Fulham and whether they are this unbeatable force that we saw earlier in the season, who looked like they were going to crush anything that stood in their way. I mean, they'll neglect me to say that with point out the amount of talented players they've got, but with the talented players they have got, they should be, looking at this Bristol City game and thinking, yeah, we'll storm past these. But considering they have been a bit sloppy recently, I don't think you can rule anything out. You're quite right, Justin. Right, let's have a little break. After that, we'll talk about some of the big news from the past few days. Yes, it's time for the news and points deduction mania in the Championship at the moment, Justin, because Reading are set to get a points deduction of up to 9 points for breaching financial rules. The club are in talks over what their penalty will be. Various reports seeming to indicate it's going to be between 6 and 9, Justin, but another points deduction in the Championship. It's considering everything that's been cracking off with COVID recently, it seems like punishing teams by, docking them points doesn't really seem to be the way to go about it. I don't know about you.
I think it's a complete farce. We could be heading into a season where relegation is decided by who's been deducted the most points. At the minute, Derby are leading that. Reading are next. Who's after Reading? Maybe Birmingham City, maybe Forest, if we were to speculate. Those teams who they do cut FFP or profit and sustainability quite close of late, but it's farcical. Yeah, why should you punish teams? I know it's in the rules, but why punish teams for overspending when you should be helping them? It doesn't make sense to put them in a worse state off the pitch. It's completely bizarre and backward, really. That's why the EFL needs reform, in my opinion.
If I were to play devil's advocate, though, clubs in the Championship have been, spending beyond their means for quite some time. Derby are a prime example of that. Look where they are now. Reading are another one who have been doing that for quite some time. I remember in the 2018-19 season when they were spending 4 times on wages what they're making in their income, which is just mental, absolutely mental. And I don't think they've particularly got much better in terms of, how much they're spending compared to what they're earning. And I imagine they're not the only 2 clubs who are in that position. So can you really point all the fingers at the EFL when surely the teams and the owners have also got to take some of the blame here as well?
No, you're absolutely right. The EFL can only do so much, but the EFL is self-governed by the owners of every club, so they're going to look out for themselves, aren't they? They're not going to put rules in place that is going to impede them in any way, which is why they've put in this £39 million cap of that 3-year period for profit and sustainability. Now, if you have that cap, you're going to spend up to that cap. Mel Morris admitted to budgeting just under that cap, so it just doesn't work. So I think most clubs actually are probably wanting to get as close to that cap as they can, because they feel that they're going to compete as close to those parachute payment affected clubs as much as possible, which just isn't the case. You don't have to do that. There are plenty of examples of clubs not doing that and getting promoted. It's a backward way of thinking. I think the rules need adjusting. I think things need to be put in place to help clubs rather than punish them. And it's just frustrating that another club is impacted by rules set by the owners of the league that they sit in. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's all to get a bit of that sweet Premier League pie, isn't it? But it's all just gambling at the end of the day, isn't it? It's gambling with the club's long-term future for that big payday, and sometimes it pays off. don't name any names, Aston Villa, but there are other clubs who, it's not worked for, and now we're seeing the full effect of that. Sheffield Wednesday are another club who have been gambling on the club's long-term future and are in a bit of a sticky situation themselves now. So, yeah, it's I feel like there should have been some sort of. It's easy to say this in hindsight, but it feels like there should have been some foresight that this was going to happen eventually. When this has been happening for season upon season, hasn't it? Where clubs are spending beyond their means, with no long-term plan about what will happen if they don't get to that Premier League pot of gold. So let's stick with the theme, Justin. Derby have now officially gone into administration, meaning they've got a 12-point deduction. The administrators say their immediate objectives are to ensure the club completes all its fixtures in the Championship this season. It comes after Derby owner Mel Morris has apologised to the fans with the club going into administration. As a Derby fan, what would you say to the administrators who have come into your club and are now trying to figure out how to sustain the long-term future?
Pull your finger out. Simple as that.
The administrators?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been well documented that administrators are just in it for themselves. I don't want to be too critical of administrators, but they get paid as well. It costs Wigan £2 million for their season in which they were administration for. So they want to not drag the process out for as long as possible. They're impacted by the administration themselves, because obviously they get paid for as long as it takes. So in pulling their finger out and finding a buy for the football club and getting the club on a stable path and making sure jobs are secure, I think pulling the finger out is the thing that I would say to them, because Derby are a big football club, and for a long time the EFL and other chairmen have wanted to make an example of them, but now's the time to eradicate all of that and move on, and in finding a new buyer and closing that chapter is the quickest way that's going to happen and the best way it's going to happen.
Seems like saying to the administrators who have, at the time of recording, only been at Derby for a matter of hours, telling them to pull the finger out is a bit harsh, Justin.
I don't care. This is my football club, and I want my football club to be safe. I want a football club to support at the end of the day. And if the administrators aren't doing their job, then that's not going to happen. So you've been in the job for 3 hours. Don't care. Get your finger out. Let's go. Bind a buyer.
They've got, as we heard from Kieran Maguire from the Price of Football podcast at the weekend, these administrators have got their hands full. I think I'm right in saying, as administrators go as well, they are top tier administrators, which will be good news for Derby fans. But as I said, they've got their hands full trying to figure out the long-term future of the club, who's going to buy it, that kind of thing, and where the hell they're going to get any money from. So good luck to them. I think they deserve that much at least. Meanwhile, Wayne Rooney is paying for players and staff away travel and accommodation out of his own pocket, and has also promised to help support staff who were set to lose their jobs. I tell you what, I feel like this time 6 months ago, Wayne Rooney was getting, battered by Derby fans all over the place, wasn't he? Not as much as the owners for not giving communication to the fans, but Rooney is really coming out of this whole saga as, a top bloke, isn't he? No matter what the media says about him, he is really showing that he is a top bloke at the end of the day.
Yeah, he's showing that he's a good manager as well. He's leading the football club. The football club's not had leadership for as long as I can remember, maybe since 2014, 2015, when the club changed hands to Mel Morris. And as I say, he's showing leadership. He's showing that he's a good coach as well by getting this team playing good football. No one expected it. For them to only be on -2 at the moment is a godsend, really. It's a massive surprise to everyone. And what he's doing off the pitch, I mean, he paid for the drone that analyzes all the games, all the training sessions. He paid for the drone because I imagine Mel Morris didn't want to fork out for it. And that's just the making of the man. And he's proving to everyone that he's got what it takes, because this is a hard situation to be in, let's say.
Yeah. The cynical people will be listening to this and saying, well, he is a multimillionaire, and that's the very least people should be asking. But, Mel Morris is an even bigger multimillionaire and isn't paying for any of these things. So I think credit where credit's due. Wayne Rooney is really showing himself to be a top man, really. Elsewhere, Wickham owner Rob Couhig says he's considering legal action against the club's relegation. He says he's furious and that Mel Morris made a deliberate policy to fight it out and make sure they start the season in the Championship. Any sympathy for Mr. Couhig?
I don't have any sympathy. This actually really irks me. I understand that Derby's playing squad was made up of players in which Derby flouted the rules, were able to afford to bring in. But I don't think that's the reason why Wickham were relegated. I think I made the point of it's like being in a hotel and some people get food poisoning, and then you try and make a claim on your travel insurance, even though you weren't poorly yourself. Wickham weren't affected by this. Derby were under true transfer embargoes last season. And in fact, Wickham got into the league because of when they're outside the playoffs based on PPG, if I was to lay that one in there as well. I don't have any sympathy for Rob Couhig. I think they need to get on with things. I don't think they've lost out because of Mel Morris's overspending. I think they lost out because, to be blunt, they weren't good enough to stay in the league.
That's a fair point. Peter Probos, Darren Ferguson, says it'll be difficult for goalkeeper Christy Pym to get back into the team after he, quote, overstepped the mark following their loss to Reading last week. Pym has apologised for what happened, but Ferguson says he's got to have discipline and it's too early to say whether the goalkeeper has played his last game for the club. I'm very interested to know what's happened there because it sounds like there was one hell of a kerfuffle after that Reading defeat last week. Lewis O'Brien has signed a new deal at Huddersfield. It means the 22-year-old will be with the club until 2025. This surprised me because Lewis O'Brien has been linked with a move to Leeds, I think. But for Huddersfield to nail him down for, an extra 4 years, that's a massive boost for them, isn't it?
Massive, yeah. Surely there's a release clause in there because, I mean, no disrespect to Huddersfield, but what does Lewis O'Brien get out of it? An increase in salary, but I imagine he would have been in the Leeds starting lineup within a season or two because he's a very good player. So yeah, Huddersfield have played a blinder here, and they've really maximised a good value in their squad with getting him to agree a new deal. Yeah, really good effort from Huddersfield there.
Yeah, really good effort. I'd be very interested, as you say, to know what the details are of this contract. But
we'll never know.
We'll never know unless there is a transfer clause and Leeds trigger it or another club triggers it in the near future. But fair play to Huddersfield. It's a massive boost for them. Preston have given new contracts to Jordan Storey and Brad Potts. Now, this is interesting, Justin. Championship clubs are being invited to trial safe standing. Clubs have 2 weeks to express their interest in doing so and will then be given a license to do it in the new year. What do you think of that?
I heard it on the radio, and I mean, I've been in away ends where there's been limbs and my shins have been absolutely destroyed. From what I heard on the radio, actually, I think that eradicates that, which is a nice thing, because if your team scores in the last minute, you want to be involved in it, and it's terrifying. It's a terrifying proposition to end up 3 rows in front. No idea how you got there. I think in the stadium's current stature, I think it is unsafe because people want to stand. So yeah, it's a big move and one that I fully support, and I think most clubs will be on board with it. I hope. Yeah.
Well, I've spoken to. As part of my actual job, I've spoken to campaigners of the victims of the Hillsborough disaster, and they were obviously for quite some time against safe standing, but now they've come round and realised that standing up when it's just seats is not safe at all, and safe standing in the current form where there's a barrier and then there's these fold down seats behind is just much safer for everyone involved. So yeah, I'd be very interested to see which clubs take part in it as well, and whether this is going to become a regular thing in a few seasons time. But safe standing, I'm all for it. And finally, former Cardiff and Sheffield Wednesday winger Kadeem Harris is joining Metalist Kharkiv in Ukraine. Fancy a trip to Ukraine, Justin?
I've wanted to go to Ukraine for a while, actually, but not to see Metalist Kharkiv. That's a surprise, actually. I thought he might have had a championship club come in for him. He's a good player, I think.
Yeah, he's he didn't win too many plaudits for his performances at Sheffield Wednesday last season, but he has shown in the past that he is a capable player at this level and is at very least a squad player in the Championship, really, isn't he? Anyway, now it's time for this. Yes, it's time for the Craig Bryson pub quiz. And yes, I have finally made a jingle. Don't know why I went with the Brommy accent, but there you go. Yes, so this is the part of the show where Justin is going to give me 6 clues about a mystery Championship legend who has made at least 200 Championship appearances. All I've got to try and guess is who it is. So far this season, I am 1-0 up. Justin is yet to get off the mark yet, despite having 3 goes at it so far. This is my 3rd go, so I've got a chance to double my lead and really make Justin sweat over the next couple of weeks or so. So, Justin, let's kick things off, shall we? Can you give me the first clue in the Craig Bryson pub quiz this week?
I have made 289 appearances, scoring 27 goals.
Okay. That sounds like a centre midfielder. I will go with Dean Whitehead.
No, it's not. I'm sure you. Dean Whitehead's one of them ones that you say quite often as a first.
Yeah, he's one that always comes to my head for some reason. Nonetheless, next one, please.
I started my career at Colchester United, where I made 136 appearances before moving on to Reading.
Is it Greg Halford?
Oh, piss.
What a shout that is for me. 2, ladies and gentlemen, count them. 2 clues in. Surely that deserves some sort of bonus points for me there, because that was a class act in Championship Craig Bryson pub quizzing right there. Justin, head in his hands. He can't believe what's happening here. I have just dropped a massive bombshell there. Justin, how are you feeling?
I think my reaction said it all. Just literally fall away in my chair going, oh, pissed. Pretty disappointed.
Out of interest, what were the other clues?
My career then stalled when I moved to Reading, where I only made 3 appearances, and then I moved on to Sunderland, where I only made 9 appearances before I had loan spells at Charlton and Sheffield United in the Championship. I then moved to Wolves before dropping into the Championship with Portsmouth. That's probably where I had his best spell, before spells at Forest, Brighton, Rotherham, Birmingham City and Cardiff.
Oh, you're still going? Okay, carry on.
There's more clues. There's pretty long clues, to be fair. I'm something of a utility player, playing right back, right midfield, centre midfield, and as a striker, where I actually scored 6 goals in 9 games. The final clue is a good one. I once joked about Derby calling their game off because of snow, despite no snow being present in the car park, before my car also got stuck in snow. That happened.
I enjoyed that last clue. Greg Halford. To be fair to you, I've been critical of the players that you've picked for the Craig Bryson pub quiz earlier this season, but that one is more acceptable, in my opinion.
I feel like if you played Football Manager sort of the mid to late noughties, this was an easy one, because Greg Halford was just one of those players that you'd pick up because he could play right back, because he could play right mid and up front as well. And he was very nifty in sort of FM 08 and what have you.
If my memory serves me right, he also had a very good long throw, which I was always very keen on in my early days of Football Manager, because I am a shithouse. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Second Tier Podcast, and this has been the midweek preview show. May I remind you that Who Knows Wins this week? The big prize, the win pot, is £1,200. All you've got to do to enter the league is pay £3 and you'll be in with a chance of winning. All you got to do is correctly predict the most correct, I've said correct twice there, Championship results from the 3 p.m. games on Saturday, and you'll be in with a chance of winning. Why not give it a go? And you can also enter multiple times if you really fancy your chances. So yeah, make sure you download the app now. Who Knows Wins, and join our league. All you got to do is enter the code SECOND. So this has been the Second Tier Podcast. We'll be back on Sunday to review all the games from the past weekend. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
Thank you for listening.